Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've all had a wonderful, wonderful new year, enjoyed a celebration safely, and yet had a ton of fun doing it. Before we get into my top 10 indie games for 2012, I just want to say what a hell of a year it's been for my channel. From going from a nobody, starting with StarCraft 2 casting, to really becoming what my channel has become today with a focus on indie games and indie game playthroughs. I want to thank all of you for allowing me to get to the point I am now. Over 1,000 of you now have joined into my little bandwagon and followed me along in my journey through all these crazy games, both good and bad. But most of all, I've come across some amazing indie games through the year. In my opinion, 2012 was one of, if not the best year for indie games in general. We've had some real treasures, and to be honest, narrowing it down to 10 games was incredibly difficult for me to do. So without further ado, I present to you my top 10 indie games of 2012, and keep in mind, this is of course my personal opinion, and not to take it as the end-all be-all top 10 best. I'm sure we can all agree though, that the following 10 games have been great to experience. So let's get going. Number 10, Perspective. What can I say about Perspective? This game came out of nowhere for me, was designed by students, and is 100% free to download and play. All of which are red flags for a very mediocre, if not bad game. A puzzle platformer that questions reality from the perspective of the player. Perspective really came out of nowhere for me and was a phenomenally fun game, and I was overjoyed when I started playing it. A simple yet charming art style, music that changes with gameplay and puzzles that get progressively harder, all the while maintaining unique and fun ways of solving said puzzles. Perspective did everything right and deserves a solid spot on my top 10 list. Stop listening to me talking about it. Go download this game and play it. Like I said, it's free. Number 9, Natural Selection 2. For me, this game was a dream come true. Mixing my favorite genres of games, both first-person shooters and real-time strategies, while maintaining balance and a competitive edge. I had been watching Natural Selection 2 for a long time. 2 players are the commanders of the opposing factions, Space Marines and aliens respectively. They command, they build buildings, they upgrade their units, much like anyone who plays any RTS in the vein of StarCraft. The kicker is that the units are controlled by other players. It's a game that requires insane amounts of teamwork, listening, and a heaping amount of learning. But once all the gears start grinding and everything starts to work in sync, that satisfying feeling of crushing your opponent has no equal. Top it off with excellent looking graphics, smooth gameplay, and really solid controls. Natural Selection 2 should be lauded for doing something unique and doing it so Number 8, Miasmata. Look, I know I dogged this game in my first impressions. In fact, I really didn't like it right away. But after spending more time with it, and I mean a lot more time with the game, it really began to stick with me. The sense of loneliness, the urge to just survive, and the creeping feeling that a demon cat could be around the next corner if you don't hurry up, completely outweighs my gripes with the loose controls and the off and on frame rate. No game has made pure survival like this in a long time, and the puzzle-like elements combined with island exploration and a dash of horror really does well for Miasmata. So all of my critiques and all of my criticisms of the game in my first impressions are completely outweighed, and I'll admit I was in the wrong. Good job, Miasmata. I actually really love you. Number 7, Awesomenauts. I'm mildly ashamed to admit just how many hours I've put into Awesomenauts. If there's one thing MOBAs in general do and do well, it's make their game completely and utterly intimidating for the player to jump in and play. They're notorious for their horrid communities, difficult to learn gameplay, and necessary and perfect teamwork in the higher ends of matchmaking. but Awesomenauts does away with that. Taking the top-down 5 vs 5 setup and changing it to a 3 vs 3 side-scrolling action platformer really helps in bringing the style of game to the masses. Familiar controls, a friendly HUD while slowly unlocking your abilities the more you play, inches you into the game as opposed to throwing you into a war that seems to be well already underway. The awesome cartoony graphics style also helps too, and there's no pun intended there. Besides, it's also a game that has Total Biscuit voicing a weird bug-like creature riding a three-eyed fish while having a 20s mobster-style voice. What more could you really want? Number 6. Lone Survivor. Ever wonder what it would be like if Silent Hill had been made during the 16-bit heyday of gaming? Well, wonder no more, good friend. Lone Survivor is your answer. Who knew a 16-bit game could be so frickin' terrifying? A thrilling story of survival, love, loss, and just maintaining your sanity in the midst of the apocalypse, Lone Survivor claws at you, making you question just what is happening on the screen, and if you believe what is being shown to you. Outside of a slightly clunky inventory system and a confusing 3D map for a 2D game, Lone Survivor really struck a chord with me as I played. I was sad, I was scared, happy, relieved, but most of all, interested in what was happening as I played. And that is really what determines if I'm going to continue playing. And boy, did I continue playing. Number 5. Hotline Miami. Hotline Miami wins my award for most surprising game. For a game that comes off as a top-down beat-em-up with a puzzle element kind of tossed in there, I was shocked when I began to question the player's motives and the character's motives all at once. Bringing to light violence in games, the necessity to succeed, and the well-being of one's mental stability if one were a hired assassin, Hotline Miami really does capture the player from the word go. Top it off with trippy 80s colors and graphics, electric music, and a never-ending swaying to your screen as you play. This is a game you must go and play and experience for yourself. It really sends an interesting message to the player, solid controls, and a hyper-violent situation played out in front of you. It's a blast. Go check it out. Number 4. Mark of the Ninja. Clay Entertainment really knows what they're doing. Having created Shank, Shank 2, Mark of the Ninja, and now Don't Starve, it's hard to argue with their pedigree of game. Mark of the Ninja wasn't just one of my favorite indie games this year, it was one of my favorite games in general this year, and easily the best stealth game I've played in years. Tight controls, a simple but effective stealth system, beautiful hand-drawn graphics, and a fun upgrade system really sell this game. And hey, it helps that it makes you feel like a total badass as you sneak around all Batman style. Need I say more? Number 3. Legend of Grimrock. Almost Human had a very difficult task ahead of them with Grimrock. Bringing back old school dungeon crawling game and making it fun. With games like Skyrim dominating the RPG market and all its new modern toys and mechanics, I had my doubts that anyone besides those looking for a heaping dose of nostalgia would enjoy The Legend of Grimrock. But boy was I wrong, and I sure am happy I was. Turns out, grid-based dungeon exploration, puzzle solving, and point-and-click combat is still as fun as it was back in the early 90s. It also helps that The Legend of Grimrock is gorgeous, and their lighting effects really immerse you into the depressing atmosphere of being tossed into a dungeon as a prisoner. Top it off with a dungeon creator and an active modding community, and you have more gameplay than $15 should allow. Welcome to spot number 3 on my list, Legend of Grimrock. Number 2. FTL. Number 1. Raise our shields, power up our photon torpedoes, and prepare to be boarded. Move our injured crew to the med bay. Evacuate the engine room and open the cargo bay doors. We're going to deprive our visitors of oxygen. Let's be honest. Are we surprised that FTL is on my list, never mind so high up? The pure joy of nerding out and being able to captain and manage your own ship is the exact fantasy FTL looks to create. And I'll be damned if they haven't created one of the most addictive indie games I've ever played. Ever. After raising over 200% of their initial Kickstarter goal, FTL was the first Kickstarter game to really meet and blow away people's expectations. It showed that Kickstarter wasn't just paying for a dream, that dreams can come true. FTL, you've sucked away hours of my life, and I haven't even unlocked and seen everything there is to see. I foresee many more hours of Captain Mathis bumbling through space, sacrificing his crew in horrendous ways, and yet somehow making it to the final sector of space, only to be horribly destroyed by the final cruiser. I can't wait. Number 1. Journey. When thinking back on my playthrough of Journey, I can't help but immediately feel emotional about it. The experiences I had with the game, exploring a forgotten and destroyed city, learning about what happened, feeling joy, sadness, terror, journeying through life, death, and rebirth. The roller coaster ride of emotions was, and still is, amazing to recall. But most of all, it was the excitement of exploring and experiencing the game with random players. The game would really join you up with just a random player. It would give you no name, no indication. They could be off in the distance that you could see them. It was completely random. The excitement of seeing someone like you, running up to them and only being able to communicate with them with a single musical note, was something to behold. When something joyful happens in the game, and spamming your musical note, both of you seemingly so happy. Or when something sad happens, and you temporarily lose your partner, and you frantically search for him or her, the feeling of relief when you find them is bizarrely intense. And for me, the saddest moment. I had been going through the entirety of Journey with one particular player. A little over halfway through, the player sat down. I wait patiently for them to return, and then they slowly began to fade away. A tinge of sadness had come over me. I eventually came across someone new, and it was a blast going through the rest of the game with them, but I'll always remember that one player who I experienced most of the game with, and I will miss them, oddly. For all these range of emotions, gorgeous graphics, and an amazing setting with a subtle story to top it off, Journey easily takes my number 1 spot in my top 10. And that, ladies and gentlemen, wraps up my top 10 indie games for 2012. If 2012 did anything for indie games, it showed that they can stand up and even destroy AAA games as far as creativity and uniqueness goes. I can't wait to see what 2013 holds. We already have some very interesting and very fun betas of indie games out there. Most notably Project Zomboid and Don't Starve. If anything, 2013 could be the biggest year for indie games thus far, and I cannot wait to dive in headfirst. I hope you enjoyed my top 10 list, and I hope you at least got to experience a few of these games on my list for yourself. If not, go check them out. They're well worth it. And I will see you all shortly. As always, thank you so much for supporting me and swinging by my channel, and I cannot wait to continue producing content for you all to enjoy. I'll see you later.